All right, everybody, welcome to the Social Dig, the greatest underrated show on the World Wide Web. I'm your host, Mr. Rob G, and as always, we're going to be digging into the topics that keep you talking and the talk that keeps you thinking. Now, just please remember, share this show with your friends and family. Skeptics and non-skeptics are all invited to the conversation. You know how we do. I'm going to go ahead and bring in my guy, Mateo. Mateo, what's up?
How you doing there, brother? Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you too, man. You already know what time it is. You already know what we have to do here. So,
Indeed.
Glad to be here. So I hear your heater up, right? Your heater down or
We're
up?
down. We're down right now in Game 1 of the NBA Finals. We're down by 14 against the Denver guys. But hey, it's only Game 1. We're resilient. We'll see what happens. So anyhow, and we got our Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup Final Saturday night. So be there.
Nice. So
and we already got a hurricane brewer. We got a tropical storm in the Gulf of Mexico. So life is normal here in South Florida. Just
Yikes. Well, we aired the replay of the NASA and SpaceX show that we had done a few months back, and after watching it, I think we kind of pretty much summarized what we were to expect in this hearing that we just had. And we'll be jumping into all that stuff in a minute. But what we're going to do first, like always, is jump. All right, so this week in Discovery News, what do we have here? We're going to be talking about Gary McKinnon and Donna Hare and their ties to NASA, since this is a NASA-themed show today. And actually, are you familiar with these two?
Yeah, I am, but I'm not familiar with what is recently in the news. So fill me in, fill us all in.
Sure. So, okay. So we're going to start it out with Donna here. So it was some time back, actually, when Dr. Greer did the Disclosure Project, the first Disclosure Project. She actually took part in that. And I actually have a story that I want to get into with regarding her. So let me go ahead and get into that. She actually worked for a contractor that worked with NASA, and she made some pretty bold claims about some of the stuff that she was privy to or that she ended up seeing while she was there. So, with that being said, ex-NASA employee, and this is actually from How and Wise, this article, and we'll get into a video as well. So, ex-NASA employee saw high-res UFO alien contact craft photos, and she's ready to testify before Congress. So, after the Pentagon's great UFO declassification and congressional hearings, NASA decided to hunt down the aliens. The agency possesses advanced technology on planet Earth, exploring the possibility of transforming satellites into alien seekers to probe unexplained sightings without launching new equipment. The Galileo project is designing a space mission to rendezvous with the next anomalous Oumuamua-like interstellar object that zooms into our solar system. Is that the first time NASA has become interested in aliens? NASA whistleblowers who claim to have closely worked in some of the top missions do not think so. Former NASA employee Donna Hare reportedly saw a photo of a distinct UFO. Her colleague explained that it was his job to airbrush such evidence of UFOs out of photographs before they were released to the public. On May 9th, 2001, over 20 military intelligence, government, corporate, and scientific witnesses came forward at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. to establish the reality of UFOs, or extraterrestrial vehicles, extraterrestrial life forms, and the resulting advanced energy and propulsion technologies. As part of this disclosure project, Donna Hare, a photographic scientist, testified to have worked for NASA contractor Philco Ford in the early 1970s. She had a high class security clearance to walk in NASA's photo lab and other departments. During the Disclosure Project press conference, Hare revealed that NASA covered up and eliminated space anomalies such as UFOs from the satellite photos. Harris got several awards in the space programs. She dedicated most of her time as a technical illustrator to the space programs. She created lunar maps and landing slides and had been working for 15 years as a subcontractor for NASA. So, I know you stated that you weren't aware of this, and I actually have footage of her from the Disclosure Project that we'll go ahead and show, where she kind of backs up these statements here. So here we go.
Thank you, Carl. Good morning, everyone. My name is Donna Hare, and I worked at Philco Ford Aerospace from 1967 to 1981. During that time, I was a design illustrator, draftsman. I did the launch slides and landing slides, and also projection plotting boards, lunar maps for NASA. We were a contractor, but most of the time I worked on site, in Building 8. I had the opportunity to do extra work during downtime, which was between missions, and I walked into a photo lab, which was the NASA lab, across the hallway. I had a secret clearance, which is not that high, but I was able to go into restricted areas, which this was. At the time, I was talking to one of the techs in there, and he drew my attention to a photograph, a NASA photograph. It had a dot on it, and I said, "What is that?" Well, he drew my attention to it, and I said, "Is that a dot on the emulsion?" And he said, and he's smiling, and he has his hands crossed, and he said, "Round dots on the emulsion don't leave round shadows on the ground." And this was an aerial photograph of the Earth, I'm assuming the Earth, because it had pine trees on it, and the shadows of the craft, or whatever it was, were in the same angle as the trees. And by its very nature, UFO, and I wanted to clarify that to a gentleman that was talking to me, means unidentified. So I did not know what this was. But I realized at this point that it's very secret, that it was kept secret, because I asked him, "What are you going to do with this piece of information?" And he said, "We always airbrush these out before we sell them to the public." So they're pesky little creatures appearing on this photograph they wanted to get rid of. After that, I decided I would ask questions to other people that work there. And I found that I had to ask them away from the site and not on site. A guard told me that he was asked to burn some photographs and not to look at them. And there was another guard guarding him, who was in green fatigues, watching him burn the photographs. And he said he was too tempted. He looked at one, and it was a picture of a UFO, and he was very descriptive. I can go into that later with anyone. He immediately was hit in the head, and he had a big gash in his forehead. He was knocked out, and he's terrified, so he would have to be protected. Another incident, I knew someone in quarantine with the Apollo astronauts. He told me that the Apollo astronauts saw craft on the moon when we landed, and that is what he told me. And he also was afraid. He said that the astronauts are told to keep this quiet. They're not allowed to talk about it. So I do want to let you know that I worked out there for a number of years, and I ran into this. So it's not something everyone knows that works out there for a long time. My boss didn't know about it. Some people that sat right next to me didn't know about it. It's very strange, because I don't know how they can do it, but they can let some people know about it and then others not. I'm willing to testify before Congress that what I'm saying is true, and thank you very much.
So, in her own words, this is her truth. This is what she stated at the Disclosure Project 1.0 back in 2001. So I guess this might give you a glimpse into what maybe to expect in this next one that's coming up here. What did you think about that? Had you ever seen this video? Had you ever heard anything about this?
Yes, I have. I did recall that from the first Disclosure Project, and I was just when I mentioned it earlier, I was just curious what had brought it up recently. But I see now, looking online, that others have brought her up again too, because the whole NASA UAP committee meeting and all of that sort of cover up, or all of that work and what's gone on in the past is never mentioned, right? So and wasn't mentioned, and we're going to get into that. But I am familiar, and yes, it's very compelling, her story, and it's been this way for what, 20 years, and it will be very interesting if they call anyone like her in the future, or if Stephen Greer next week, or whenever it is on the 12th, 10th, 11th, and the 12th, brings up anything like this again in his next disclosure project event that's upcoming in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I mean, like I stated, it's her truth. I mean, I don't see any reason for her to not be telling the truth. However, you have to take things with a grain of salt. It is her truth. So, potentially she's somebody who comes back to his 2.0 hearing and testifies again. But the thing is, and the thing that one of the things I really liked about the Disclosure Project is after everyone spoke their truth, they ended it with, and I will agree to testify before Congress. So Congress making statements like that. This makes Congress fully aware of the people out there that are willing to be called up to be spoken to. So I thought that was pretty cool. Now, what happened in reaction to this, which goes into our second story, Gary McKinnon is a hacker from the UK, or was a hacker, and he actually got interested in he viewed this Disclosure Project, got interested in what she said, and took it upon himself to go ahead and hack into the NASA servers, hack into the Pentagon, and other such things. So I'll go ahead and go over a story on Gary McKinnon because he makes even bolder
Hmm.
claims on what it is that he captured.
I
And
remember
you
this
can
one.
see right here an image of what we'll be talking about here. So let me go ahead and bring that up. And so the story comes from the Sun. And a lot of people say things about the Sun, but this is from the Sun, and this is an actual thing that happened because it was widely publicized on national news that they were trying to extradite this guy back to the U.S. to charge him for these hacks. But he states, this is, I hacked into NASA. This is his story. I hacked into NASA to find proof of UFOs. I saw cigar-shaped alien craft among thousands of photos in U.S. Must Come Clean. A hacker who broke into NASA's computers to find proof of UFOs claims he discovered a picture of a mysterious alien craft shaped like a cigar amongst thousands of other photos. Brit cyber sleuth Gary McKinnon was accused of perpetrating the biggest military computer hack of all time when he broke into 97 U.S. government computers. U.S. prosecutors wanted him jailed for up to 60 years, but his extradition from the UK was blocked after a 10-year legal battle, and he remains a free man. Now, at the time of this article, Gary 56 said he did no harm and was merely looking for evidence that U.S. government was actively covering up UFOs. And he told the Sun Online what he found left him gobsmacked as he stumbled across thousands of photos during his cyber sting. This is a quote from him. It's a fact that there are objects we don't understand flying around in our skies. It's also a fact that there are scientific, intelligence, and military departments that study these objects. Gary, also known as Solo online, claims to have found one particularly striking photograph, an image of a cigar shaped, non man made craft captured in a satellite photo. It appeared to be a very close up image of the object in space with strangely shaped domes on all sides. The image was the only one Gary managed to see himself before he lost the connection. But in the files, he says there were thousands of more photos. Now, Gary was attempting to prove an account by former NASA employee Donna Hare, who we just watched, who claimed satellite images were often scrubbed of UFO evidence at the Johnson Space Center. He claims he found 4 folders, which were called filtered, unfiltered, processed, and raw, in the systems of the facility's Building 8, which is where Donna Hare said she worked. Thanks to his painfully slow 56K dial up connection, you remember those, he says he only managed to get the one image out of the folder before his remote connection cut and he lost a chance to print the screen. Quote from him again: I was absolutely gobsmacked, and those folders had thousands more images. Now, as the discussion around UFOs ramp up following a public hearing on the phenomenon in Washington, Gary's hack and what he claims to have found are once again in the spotlight. Gary, however, does not think the new wave of interest will lead to much further disclosure, and he has doubts about the motivations behind it. He states the hearing is not significant at all for disclosure. These hearings, discussion panels, and the like are never fruitful for disclosure, he said. We mustn't forget the military mindset. The unknown is either a potential threat or a potential tool to be used. Another quote here states disclosure comes from the witnesses, not the military or the government. All they give us is lies. He believes the U.S. are covering up information on UFOs, either because the crafts are so advanced they are beyond human comprehension, or they have managed to extract secret tech from the mysterious objects which they want to keep hidden. The Sun Online has been to NASA for comment. Gary believes he proved Hare's story and considers his hack as mission accomplished. But what followed was 10 years of hell as the U.S. attempted to get him to face the music. Now, Gary was arrested in 2002 and again in 2005 at the request of the U.S. He was interviewed by cops and accused of committing $700,000 worth of damage and interfering with U.S. Air Force files on September 11, 2001. U.S. officials accused him of breaking into dozens of U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, and Department of Defense computers, as well as 16 NASA computers, and even taking down a network of 2,000 machines. He faced decades in prison if convicted and believes authorities would have even tried to execute him for his actions. Quote, I would have had a very hard time, and they promised to punish me to the max if I didn't consent to extradition, he said. One of them even said they wanted to see him fry in a reference to the electric chair. The UK government agreed to extradite him in 2006, leading to years of appeals and a high-profile campaign. Now, he won his battle for freedom in October 2012 when Home Secretary Theresa May blocked his extradition, citing his Asperger's syndrome. Then 2 months later, Director of Public Prosecutors Keir Starmer confirmed he would not be prosecuted in the UK. Now, Gary insists his motives were harmless and claims he was only able to break into machines as they relied on unsecured versions of Windows. He does not believe he is still on the radar of the American and British authorities, saying that they have, quote, more important things to worry about than a one-time hacker. So, pretty amazing story. And I don't know. I mean, he claims he saw the photo. We know he had definitely 56K dollar modem was super slow, and you could not even. It would take forever to get an image to download at that speed. So he claims that he shored up her story, and like I stated before, she did stand up there in front of the uh, disclosure project after disclosure project, made her statements. That's her truth. He confirmed her truth. So, do you think there's something to that, Mateo? What do you think?
Very interesting. I was unaware of the relationship between those two as far as they're, trying to corroborate each other or help each other out. So that's a good find on your part. Totally. I mean, I'm very familiar with his story, and I don't doubt it one bit that he managed to get that one photo and screenshot it, or not quite screenshot it, but see it before he got disconnected. And remember, there was one other little tidbit he got, which was the early was a personnel list from a space force, from a space force group or something like that. We all know there's a space force now, but he actually found a personnel list referring to off-world people or off-world uh, military personnel who were part of this space force
And off,
long before, 20 years before it
and
actually was formed, right?
I believe it was actually Space Command.
Space,
And I,
they called it
and
something else, but I remember there was like this USS
yes,
S, some
so the
acronym which stood for United States Spaceship or something like that. That was actually in the listing, which, you know, that's, in my personal opinion, you can't make that stuff up typically, right? That was pretty interesting. Now, there were some people in there who I guess were considered alien as well, extraterrestrial, but who knows? But yeah, he found some stuff, and they wouldn't have gone after him so hard if he hadn't.
that's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
And to kind of go off of what you said about the USS, the ships that he. So apparently he, when he had gone ahead and hacked in there, he saw names of ships, and he tried to reference those to any land-based ships or vehicles that existed, and none of them matched.
No.
And so he had tied those into being ships that traveled space, which is a possibility. I mean, everyone talks about a secret space program. I touched on that in the replay video, even when one of our subscribers, Angela G, had asked me originally if I thought that there was a secret space program. And and what I had stated was, I'm right between Vandenberg and Edwards, like smack dab in the middle. We know they shoot things off from Vandenberg all the time, and they always dismiss them off as missiles. But who's to say that it's a missile every time? You know what I mean? So that we really could jump into a rabbit hole with that. But there
The NRO launches go on there all the time.
and
SpaceX does launches from there now too for them.
and then
So
what so putting these things together here, I have enough evidence to at least lean into the direction of feeling like these stories may have something to them. So
very good.
keeping the NASA theme going, we're going to go ahead and get out of disclosure news so we can get into the meat and potatoes. All right, so the meat and potatoes, what we are all here for, what we are here to talk about. The NASA UFO task force held a meeting yesterday, a 4-hour meeting, which I'm sure you have some things to say about what happened here, and I have some things to kind of put as well. Now, one thing I will say is one of our viewers and friends of the show, Magneticus, we were chatting earlier today during the premiere, and no, actually, it was yesterday during our live stream, and I told him, I said, I can guarantee you that tomorrow, which is today, when all these podcast hosts go ahead and do shows about what took place at this hearing, they're going to say nothing burger. But I actually have some other feelings. I kind of feel partly nothing burger, but I think there's probably some good things to point out. So, what we're going to do, just to kind of get into it, in case you did not catch the hearing, we're going to go ahead and view Sean Kirkpatrick's part of the hearing where he went ahead and gave his presentation and even ended up showing a new video, which he claims is debunked, but I don't know. We're going to have to talk about that once we go ahead and look at this. So let's go ahead and jump into it right now.
And I'm happy to take any questions that you all have.
Question. We talked a lot about data already. Let's talk about sensors for a second. So you mentioned that you work with labs, academia. Do you see a need to go beyond what you mentioned earlier? That is the type of sensors we have right now, which are based on national security threats and certain phenomenologies and frequency ranges, these kinds of things. Do you see a reason of going beyond that?
Yep,
And
absolutely.
So what are some of the challenges you see there, materials or what have you?
To go down some of those characteristics to see if we can find them correlated to pilot reporting. Right. Some of those are, initially this is going to be, I'm going to say this is a bootstrap method, right? We're doing a broad spectrum search across very few indicators that we can point to that will enable us to get a little bit more data, refine that, narrow those sensors and go from there. So we aren't just relying on the DoD and IC sensors that exist today because frankly they don't point to where we want them to point, right? I mean, I'll be frank with everyone. We can point the largest collection apparatus in the entire globe at any point we want. You just have to tell me where I want to point it. Second piece of that is a lot of what we have is around the continental United States. Most people, including the government, don't like it when I point our entire collection apparatus to your backyard, right? It's not allowed. We have some laws about that, and we've got to figure out how to do this only in the areas that I can get high confidence there's going to be something there, and high confidence I'm not going to break any laws doing it. Right? So there's a trade there. So some of these ground-based point detectors are going to be necessary for that, to point up, to point out, to search. Coupled with, we're evaluating a number of sensor opportunities across different organizations, academia, industry, whatnot, that already exist or are being built for similar purposes or maybe other purposes that I might be able to recalibrate for this and see if those will have a chance of seeing that target, right? So that's where the modeling and sim comes in. Can I take that target, put it into your sensor, and have a chance of seeing it? If I can, then I might want to use that.
Thanks, Sean. I have the questions you probably don't want, which are about numbers. You had said that only a very small percentage of your cases display signatures that could be anomalous, and then followed that up with the few objects that do demonstrate potentially anomalous characteristics. What numbers are we talking about? How big is your database? How many years was it collected over? And were those observations made? And then by few, what do you mean?
Right. No, that's a great question. So this chart, as I mentioned, we've updated with our current data holdings. At the time of my open hearing, we were at 650 cases-ish. We are now over 800. We are putting together our annual report, which will be due August 1 to the Hill. And in it, and there will be an unclassified version, as there always has been, we will have those updated numbers at that time. We roughly get, I mean, you can do the math, you know, it depends anywhere from 50 to 100-ish new reports a month. Now, the reason we had such a big jump recently is because I got FAA's data integrated in finally, and so we ended up with like 100 and some odd new cases. So there's reason why it's going to fluctuate. The numbers that I would say, so we're gonna try to do a little more fidelity on some of the analytics when we report out. But the numbers I would say that we see are possibly really anomalous are less than single-digit percentages of that total database. So maybe 2 to 5-ish%.
Some of the video footage that we saw, while we're all good scientists on this panel, I think that I look at it with an untrained eye of looking at that video. And so I see 3 spots moving and everything else in the background looks like it's stable. Can you talk a little bit more about either the sensor platform or what we're seeing that's stable in the background? Because they've been identified as airplanes, and there's clear description of from other data sources that came in to help clarify that. But when I look at this, what are all of the white spots in the background that we're seeing that are stable?
So those are that's a star background. Pretty sure that's a star background. Now, so you're looking at those planes were roughly 30 to 40-ish miles away, if I remember correctly. And when you see that smaller plane that comes in at the bottom, that one was much, much closer. It was like maybe 6 to 10 miles away, right? And so the jitter in the sensor is what you're looking at.
Right, okay, so the 3 spots, because they look like they're moving at about the same...
Right, they are.
Right, and if they were flying together, but they're not, is what I'm hearing. This is the sensor moving.
They're in a flight line.
Right.
So they're equally spaced in a flight line, and the sensor is jittering.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
Yes.
I want to make sure I understand the slide. It says typically reported characteristics, and there are a bunch of things here, like, for example, size, altitude, speed. If it's being observed from a single sensor, use the example of like the airplanes that were coming in, and if you don't know how far away they are, how do you assess the size?
Correct.
How do you assess the speed? This is what people would report, but it isn't necessarily,
What
for
is
example,
real.
the size of the object or the speed or any of the rest of it. Do I understand that correctly?
Partially.
Okay.
So this is not all single sensor observations. Some of these are very much multi-sensor observations.
Okay.
And this is parameterized to cover the range of things for any given parameter, the range of what's possible and what has been observed.
Okay, and then on the next slide, the one where you've got the, whatever it is, the meatball moving across the screen.
Right, that one.
So was there any look at sensor artifact, data processing artifact? I mean, the first thing that, whenever I see anything that's anomalous, I look at how was the data collected.
Yeah. So yes, these are so this is an EO sensor on an MQ-9, and we understand that very, very well. So that is a real object, absolutely.
So, Sean, I just wanted to begin by thanking you for your service to this nation, this committee. You don't exactly have the easiest job in Washington. So
No, I do not.
appreciate it.
I'm glad you recognize that.
Yes. I just have 2 questions. One, relative to what Nadia was asking you about the number of anomalous phenomena. What makes it anomalous in your view? What is the phenomenology where you're pulling those cases out and saying this is truly unexplained? And then my second question would be relative to the stigma. How damaging is that in your view? And what in particular do you think NASA can do to help remedy the situation?
Those are great questions. I'm going to take the second one first because I know we're getting short on time. The stigma has improved significantly over the years since the Navy first took this on some years ago. It is not gone, and in fact, I would argue the stigma exists inside the leadership of all of our buildings, right, wherever that is. My team and I have also been subject to lots of harassment, especially coming out of my last hearing, because people don't understand the scientific method and why we have to do the things we have to do, right? And because we can't just come out and say, you know, the greatest thing that could happen to me is I could come out and say, hey, I know where all these things are. Here you go, right? But I don't, right? And it's going to take us time to research all that. People want answers now, and so they're actually feeding the stigma by exhibiting that kind of behavior to all of us.
Yeah. So that's Kirkpatrick being Kirkpatrick. Kirkpatrick being Kirkpatrick.
He did it a month ago. He's doing it again.
And according to you, you're boiling over here.
Dude.
Feeling the same rage you did when you watched this live.
Dude, I went through this today for you, and I'm
gosh.
losing my mind. I promise not to be long-winded, but dude, this is crazy. Look, this guy, it's all part of the same conspiracy. They're working together now. I didn't know NASA and Kirkpatrick and AARO were going to work together on this, but they alluded to that. But
you mean
it's
this
obvious guy now, and they're going to get I guess AARO's going to, or the NASA team's going to send a liaison to the AARO office and vice versa. But that's all beside the point. Let's just back up here and talk about a few big things that are in his presentation, if you don't mind. First off, when he did his opening remarks, he said, my presentation last month was to brief Congress on our procedures and plans thereof, right? Which is exactly what happened with the NASA meeting. All they talked about, and if I hear these words again, I'm going to take a hostage, procedures and data. That's all they talked about. Nothing else, no cases, nothing. And I'll get into more of that later, but he basically did it again, and he brought up his same slides. Now, the only thing that he offered up that was new was the fact that they're up to 800 cases now. And he also offered up the 3 Light video, which we haven't talked about yet, but that 3 Light video. And his slides were apparently updated with numbers, although I don't think what you're looking at there isn't really much different in terms of the pie chart, but the totals were up to 800. And by the way, later on in the conference, he did mention that only 2 to 5%, this may have actually been during the teleconference after the meeting, he mentioned that only 2 to 5% of the 800 are anomalous. So in any event, it's all a bunch of word salad, and they're just talking about what they plan to do and what recommendations they're going to make and what procedures they're going to use and what data they want, what data is good and what data is not good, and how they're going to get good data. That is all they're ever talking about, and that's all Dr. Kirkpatrick talked about then and now. He got 36 minutes of this 4-hour meeting, by the way, and I don't know. I'll stop and let you.
No. It's facts
there.
But have we not learned anything from past events? What they say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Something along those lines.
Oh yeah.
I mean, so what did anyone expect? And that's kind of what I'm going to get into, because a lot of people were just fuming at the results But did you not expect these results? That's the thing. We already know that that disclosure doesn't come from that way. We know this. So
Well,
and,
let me
and
say this, and let me just say this. Weren't we already expecting that this was going to be a disappointment? Yes, to a certain degree. But here, I was actually hoping that they had actually analyzed some data and had some case results. They haven't done that at all in 7 months. And oh, by the
so
way, the report is due in 2 months. At the end of July, supposedly, they're going to have their report, the NASA team. And oh, by the way, Kirkpatrick has to issue his annual report on August 1st, he talked about. So
so I think here's
there
the
isn't a lot
difference.
of time for NASA to do any real analysis between what we've just learned from them yesterday and the end of July.
I
So
think
it
I
ain't
think
going
what
to
it
be there.
is they have processed data, but they're not going to tell you that they did. See, that's
That's a
the whole part of
possibility.
the thing. So
That's a
yeah,
possibility.
that's exactly what it is, and so that's why I say take take the good things that happen out of this hearing. So few of the things, and I have some things to kind of point out. I mean, so let's point out the fact that at least the public that isn't necessarily involved in the UFO topics was able to see that this topic was actually being openly addressed for 4 hours
That's the good side.
in a serious manner. So that's a win. So that's a win. That I feel like at the very least makes those people aware that hey, wait, they are actually taking UFOs serious. Wait a minute. And then maybe that compels them to look further into the phenomena themselves. So that's a win. And so when we put aside the expectations that will not be met, and then we look at the actual benefits of what happened here, and there's more that happened here. So
I don't disagree with you there, Rob, but let me just say this. And this dawned on me today when I was doing my rewatch and when I was internalizing everything and thereafter. Watching them today and watching Kirkpatrick brought back memories, not because I was only in my, I was a toddler, but brought back memories of the videos from the 1960s where Lieutenant Major Hector Quintanilla and the other leaders of Project Blue Book and other Air Force officers would get on TV and say, we've done all the investigations and there's no evidence of ET involvement or extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence. It reminded me of that same paradigm that they were pushing, and they're the same narrative they were pushing then, and they're doing it all over again now. It's almost like history is repeating itself. So yes, it was a positive thing that NASA got on TV for 4 hours and talked about UAP, but they did it in the 60s and tried to placate the population and put everyone's mind at ease that, yeah, we're taking this seriously. It's the same narrative. They're taking it seriously. What will the results be? I don't have a lot of hope for that. So
so
there's my counterpoint.
we know they have all the data as we in the pre-show we ended up going over the fact that astronauts have been seeing things and reporting this stuff to NASA for since the dawn of the space age. So we know they have
Yeah, where was
all the
that,
data.
right? Where are all
Well,
those
that's the thing.
space shuttle incidences that you covered
We
in
will
your
never be told.
video from your replay of your video from last year, which was magnificent,
We will
right?
never be shown. We will never be told. The government, just like I stated in that video, NASA seems to be lockstep with the government. So the same rules apply. So the government will never bring disclosure. NASA will never bring disclosure. They never will. It will never happen. So what you have to do what do they say? You let a fool talk. It talks, but you're gonna get those little gems out of there, and I think that's what this is. That's how I approach all these meetings and hearings. We know what the big picture. They're not going to give us the yes answer that we're looking for, but they will trip themselves up and give little tidbits or contradict themselves or do small things that confirm other things. Now I'm going to go into and actually before I actually do that, well, actually I'll do that
Go
now.
for it.
So one of the things that I felt and why I had this chart on here is that I feel like with the confirmation, the double down, because he also confirmed this in the hearing with the Senate, doubling down on the 2 to 5% of things they just can't explain. Well, that's about what we figured prior to all those hearings, is that there was probably 2 to 5% of things that might be UFOs, and the rest is a prosaic explanation, something mundane. Now, with that being said, they went further. As you remember in the UAP report, the shapes were redacted, or in one of those releases, the shapes were redacted.
Early on, yes, and
Now
he finally reveals the shapes here.
he
Yes.
finally reveals the shapes. Now, if we look there, he states that a lot of them are round and white and some other characteristic. Now, that was a win right there. That was another win, doubling down on the fact that they still can't figure out 5% of those, that they are round and white. Because guess what? I had a sighting with round white vehicles. So for them to do that, and the reason why I'm making that point is because the data that I collected, just like we always talk about, the people collecting their own data and coming together with their own data and figuring out the big picture. So with the data that I was able to collect myself, it has been essentially verified or confirmed with the government that those type of crafts we are seeing and we don't know what they are. So that was a win. So there's other wins that we can pick up along the way without them giving us anything, without they don't think they're giving us anything, but they are. You know what I mean? And so that was one thing I wanted to point out, because I thought that was pretty
I agree with
important,
that.
because that's what we push here. We push the people sourcing their own data and then putting the picture together without the government, sidestepping the government and putting the picture together. So Kirkpatrick went ahead and did some other things. He showed these slides here. He brought up the orb again, which he did state in his presentation when they asked the questions there, that this was actually a real object.
Right.
That they don't know what this is.
And it's
this
still
was a
an
real
unknown.
object.
But
Still
this is, I
unknown.
like this. The analysis of specific cases is what I would like to see more of. I mean, the tidbits you mentioned are there, but I like to see analysis of it. But I don't want to see things that we already know are prosaic. I'd like to see analysis of things that are unknown. And our friend of the show, Tim Senor, brought it up last night on Spaced Out Radio and with Dave, that we don't need to see any more videos that were proven to be airplanes already. But I like these analyses. We need to see more of this, because that's what we want them to do. We don't want them to talk about procedures and the data they would love to have, or the procedures that they're going to recommend. Do some work.
Our friend Tom King here stated that he had 4 captures with the Cosmic Watch recently within a minute of UFO and video,
Tom.
but they could be balloons, but it's data, which is the point.
Yes.
Humanity's source data, captured data. We own that data. We control that data. We don't have to ask permission to see results of the data that we collect. So why spend so much time and spin your wheels? And that's why I said I knew a lot of people out there we're going to just be upset and say nothing burger. But are you really, like, if you're coming into these hearings and you're expecting them to give you the goods, you will be disappointed every time. The Lucy football analogy has been kicked around recently, and this applies, and it actually applies to everyone that keeps going into these hearings expecting anything but what you just got. You know what I mean? So when will humanity wake up? And I have some ideas on how we can actually get this message moved forward, because I did an evaluation on the state of ufology and where we're at, and how we can get these things moving. So we'll do that at the end. But I did have. Did you see astronaut Scott Kelly?
Oh boy. Don't
Did
get
you
me
see
started.
this guy?
Don't get me started.
So he kind of came in the Q&A session, and our friend Tim Senor was able to pose a question, and I think that question that he posed is going to be addressed in one of these clips that I have here. So let's just start off with Scott Kelly, so we could just look at what a jackass looks like. Here we go.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in here. I think make a couple of comments to just follow up on what Josh said. And my experience of flying, over 15,000 hours, 30-something years in airplanes and both in space, and the environment that we fly in, space or an atmospheric flight, very, very conducive to optical illusions. So I get it why these pilots would look at that go fast video and think it was going really, really fast. I remember one time I was flying in the warning areas off of Virginia Beach, military operating area there. And my Rio thought, the guy that sits in the back of the Tomcat, was convinced we flew by a UFO. So I didn't see it. We turned around. We went to go look at it. It turns out it was Bart Simpson, a balloon. Oftentimes in space, I would see things and I was like, oh, that's really not behaving like it should. It doesn't have the trajectory of a satellite or a planet on the back of the star field. And every single time when I would look at it long enough, I would realize that it was atmospheric lensing. It was the fact that what I was looking at was actually flying behind the atmosphere, and because of variations in the atmosphere, it made the trajectory look like it wasn't going in a straight line. It was going like this, and it would go like that, and it would turn in the other direction. Was always the case. My brother, Mark Kelly, a former NASA astronaut, and also now a U.S. Senator, I was with him for dinner last night, and he shared a story with me again that he had shared years ago, but I had kind of forgotten about it, and I think it's worth sharing. And that is when he was the commander of STS-124, I think it was, in 2008, they were getting ready to close the payload bay doors of the space shuttle. And before they do that, you got to make sure nothing interferes with the doors, because if the doors don't close properly, the space shuttle can't re-enter the atmosphere. It would come apart. It's part of the structural integrity of the vehicle. So they see something in the payload bay, and they thought it was a tool, maybe a bolt. They couldn't quite figure it out. They were potentially going to have to go and do a spacewalk to retrieve it. But before they did that, my brother grabbed the camera, they took a picture of it, and when they blew up the picture, they realized that this is not a bolt or a tool in the payload bay. It was actually the International Space Station that was 80 miles away. I mean, that's just a really good example of how this environment we operate in is so conducive to optical illusions. Oftentimes, guys fly into the water. And there are cases where, pilots have rendezvoused on a buoy because they thought that was their wingman. It's just very, very challenging environment to work in, especially at night. And in my experience, the sensors kind of have the same issues as the people's eyeballs.
Another big question category was about transparency. What is NASA hiding, and where are you hiding it? How much has been shared publicly? Has NASA ever cut the live NASA TV feed away from something? Has NASA released all UAP evidence it has ever received? What about NASA astronauts? Do they have an NDA or clearance that does not allow them to speak about UAP sightings? What are the science overlords hiding?
All right, I'll take a stab at that one. I really want to assure the public and to double down on some remarks I made this morning that this agency is absolutely cast iron committed to openness and transparency and honesty. And that commitment also extends to our live NASA TV feeds. They provide real-time footage from our various missions. Now, to my knowledge, NASA has never intentionally cut a live feed to hide anything, and that includes UAPs, of course. Sometimes there are interruptions to our feeds, but that is simply because space is a complex place. There's a vast array of natural phenomena, human-made objects, and so forth. But again, I wanted to reassure the public that we're absolutely committed to providing the public transparency and openness. Those are the hallmarks of NASA. That's why we're here today in public on TV, because we want the public to have the opportunity to see the process of this committee doing its work in public. It's only right.
Just to follow up on what I said, I didn't mean to joke about it, but in my 20 years at NASA, no one, either officially or unofficially, in my recollection, have ever discussed or briefed us or had any kind of discussions about anything that would be considered a UAP or UFO or anything like that.
And I'll ask you to stand for 1 second and state your name. I'll ask you to stand for 1 second and state your name, just so everybody know who was speaking. It's hard to see in the back.
Kelly. I'm just following up on the question about if NASA astronauts ever signed an NDA or anything of that, anything like that. In my experience of being in the astronaut office for 20 years, there was never any formal or informal discussions at all about UAPs or UFOs or anyone reporting anything that would suggest something from, beyond our planet.
So, Jackass of the Year award goes to Scott Kelly as he sat there looking so uncomfortable and so much like he was just not telling the truth. What do you think about that, Mateo?
Lots to unpack there. First off, none of what he said was barring the last comment about the NDA, because you notice how he answered that. He didn't say whether or not there was ever discussion of NDA. He just said no one talked about anything that may have been extraterrestrial or what have you. What he said with the Bart Simpson comment, which was the balloon encounter, the space shuttle issue that his brother ran into, and what was the third one? The second item that he mentioned was the what he saw, things he saw that were behind the atmosphere, the atmospheric lensing. None of that is false. In other words, yes, they probably flew their jet by a balloon, went back and checked it out and realized it was a balloon. He probably saw things in the atmosphere that got distorted by the atmosphere. I can totally believe that. And what happened to his brother with that one space shuttle STS-124 mission probably happened. 3 problems. First off, what you did and the chuckles you got with the Bart Simpson joke is going to end up monopolizing the sound bites that the press are going to take away from this 4-hour meeting. That's problem 1. So you've actually demeaned and derated the whole thing by just making fun of it again and bringing back the giggle factor. 2, the atmospheric lensing thing, that doesn't explain all the non-ballistic motion or, the 5 observables that people deal with who are in the atmosphere looking at things that are in the atmosphere, right? When lensing doesn't apply, or things that are in outer space. So, he's making statements again that basically people may imply that everything is now false, right? Everything that everyone sees that takes a 90-degree turn is due to atmospheric lensing. Not true. And then, of course, the STS missions. What about all the ones that you cited in your video from last year where it clearly wasn't the space station being off 80 miles away, making it looking like something was in the payload bay of the space shuttle? I'm sorry. I just have a problem with him doing 3 in a row like that. Basically, it closes off any possibility of anything else being true in the minds of people who may be watching this. You and I and everyone in our audience knows better, but we have a deeper understanding of what's going on here. Others don't. And then, I don't know about the NDA thing. I have a hard time believing. I agree with you. He was uncomfortable there. He may have been lying. I don't know. I really don't know, and I can't really speculate any further on that. But man, how many astronauts do we know have cited things, and how many don't because they're afraid to talk about it? So, anyhow.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you the truth. He seemed like he was definitely guarding his words. You could tell he wasn't all rambunctious and animated like he was a moment earlier
Right.
when he made the Bart Simpson
Right.
comment, and he actually looked
His
very
body language changed.
nervous
Yeah.
to say what he was saying. And if it was fact, you would state it matter of fact. I believe your body language would be different, especially if you're on a roll. You just cracked one of the best jokes of the hearing. I would figure that you'd be confident enough to make that statement if you're telling the truth with better body language. So, I mean, it's obvious. We know that astronauts have seen things, other astronauts have said it. Now, if he wants to say that he didn't see anything, okay, maybe that was just your experience. But body language, I would love to have a body language expert look at that, and I bet you they'd pick that apart and say, "Oh, the guy was lying."
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing I wanted to look at, I thought I had the video, but I didn't. But we've all seen the video by now.
I'm glad you're bringing this up. Good. Yes.
Of this video, of this image here, which I did capture. So, okay.
These were the 3 lights.
The
that
3
Sean
lights.
Kirkpatrick showed as a new video. Yes.
And they were moving from side to side in unison.
Yes.
He claims that it was due to a gimbal on the craft that was photographing these things. But the lady asked him later about those things moving, but the background is stationary though. So how does that work? How does that even work, Mateo? Wouldn't you think that everything would be moving in the image if it's the gimbal?
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought this up because even Sean Kirkpatrick came back later at the 2-hour, I have it written down here, I think it was 2-hour and 50-minute point. He came back to explain further because when the lady asked the question the first time, I felt a little embarrassed for her because she was like, what are all those other white dots in the background? And, I thought it was obvious they were stars, and that's what he said. If those were stars and there were 3 airplanes, let's say, in the foreground, 10 miles away, whatever, 5 miles away, and you're on a plane with a camera that's moving around, those 3 lights are not going to move as far as they did because of gimbaling or movement of the camera. In other words, parallax would exist like they used to later debunk the Go Fast video, but only if the plane that's taking this picture was moving, horizontally, a significant difference, and then moving right back again, which we know it wasn't. So to get that motion that the video showed, I have a hard time believing that. It's not from the sensor because, the background would have had to move with it because the planes aren't going to move with respect to the stars from an airplane that's 5 miles away, which is essentially a stationary location. Yes, so they contradict themselves here. where in one case it's parallax, in this case they're kind of trying to say the same thing, but that's not possible when your sensor's only moving a few feet. So
So
I
is
agree
this
with you. This
another?
was a weird video, and I don't know why. I don't even know how I would have done that. It
Is
almost
this
seems like they fabricated the thing, but
Is this
I don't know. What
another
do you think?
win? Is this another win for disclosure? See, let's say nothing burgers. I mean, when we look at this, it's like, oh yeah, they just released a video that they obviously know was XYZ. But then at the same time, they're gonna have to come back and explain how these
Yes.
things can move. I mean, he just said the gimbal. Okay, so you
No.
tried to use that for other things and maybe it applied, but just don't see, so it can't apply to both things. It can't apply
No.
to this and then
Exactly.
also apply to that. So
Exactly. The
I
the
think
rules were they can't change the rules when it comes to parallax.
I,
This
I
wasn't parallax.
so I think we have another nugget here. So
Yeah, maybe it was something doing something anomalous and they tried to brush it off. Now, you would think they wouldn't have shown it, right? If it was something that was going to be too revealing. But
so
who
I think
knows?
that'll be a win for us. So
Yay!
we'll take that. We'll take that. So going forward in this here, let's see. I did actually I want to kind of get in because it was actually a 4-hour event. So I think I caught the portion of the questioning where Kirkpatrick came back and explained himself. So I think we're
What
going
are
to go
you
ahead and
doing to
jump
solve
into.
the
So, per what Scott just said, I think we need to take it as an action to investigate unidentified animated phenomena to go after Bart Simpson. I think what Josh and Scott said is very, very helpful and shows why we need multiple sources of data. Were there radar hits? Were there other sightings? Unless we can look at this from a holistic perspective, it's very difficult to draw conclusions. And relative to stigma, and I appreciate the reports that our colleagues gave, I think there's plenty of stigma right here in this building, and I'm sure, Dan, you've suffered from it at times. And I just want to commend Administrator, although he's always be Senator Nelson to me, for his leadership and candidly courage in getting NASA to tackle this issue. And as we look at what Sean had articulated, that what he wants NASA to do, as we look at the recommendations for reporting and how we need to collate that reporting, I'm very concerned that this could be effectively done on an ad hoc basis. And I've been a part of far too many panels and studies that end up sitting on the shelf. I don't want this to be one of those exercises. And we can discuss this further, but I would call for and recommend a permanent office within NASA to support this activity, albeit likely a modest one, but to collate this information, collate that data, to archive the information, and act as the open, forward-facing counterpart to Sean and AARO. I think then we could continue and actually accomplish the reporting, the stigma issues that have been raised, and we could do so in a relatively affordable fashion. Because again, I don't want all of our work to end up being in vain.
Okay. Question 4, which scientific analysis techniques currently in production could be employed to assess the nature and origins of UAP? Which types of analysis techniques should be developed? So this is a two-part with what exists today and what should be. So we're looking also at recommendations. Based on the information provided by the presenters to the panel, there are very few credible analysis techniques available that currently exist to assess the nature and origins of UAP. The onset of artificial intelligence and automated analysis techniques give promise to being able to do that in the future.
This is probably more of a frustration than anything else, so I don't know how helpful it'll be, but I think we're not looking for a needle in a haystack. We're looking for an anomaly in a haystack. We don't even know that we're looking for a needle. That
it's just a discolored piece of hay.
Well, I'm from Montana, so I love good hay analogy. I don't know what the phenomenology is that we're looking for. We say anomalous. Again, this question earlier, what does that mean? Anomalous acceleration? Like, I think as we try to look at the data, we're starting from an almost impossible position when if we don't know what we're looking for, is it a radiation signature? Is it something electromagnetic? Is it something like that? Is why this is so challenging and frustrating to me, that we're talking about monitoring something that we don't even know what we're supposed to monitor.
And let me just offer, Josh, before you jump in, the scientific process of hypothesis-driven research, right? Of that, while we don't know all of the possible outcomes in the entire world, we can ask very specific questions and go about it in a very scientific process to understand. So you're right, we don't know exactly what we're looking for, but we know hotspots, as we've seen from both FAA and AARO. We do know some of those conditions that we might be looking for. So if you start with kind of what you know, or places to start to go and look, and you start with the data that we have available to us, we might start being able to untangle the chicken and egg problem.
Jen, what is the phenomena that we're looking for?
So we've heard them from Sean. I would pull up Sean's chart, but I can't quickly do that. Of the criteria that he said on the trends, I use the word criteria, he said trends, of 6 or 7 phenomena, I guess, of specific size or within a specific motion range. And it's something different than what we've seen before, something we don't recognize. And so when you go to look for something that you don't recognize, it can be pretty easy, in that we've fooled ourselves today and even watching some of these videos of what's going on. But when you're able to corroborate that with 3 or 4 other sources, it starts to make sense. Right? So something that looks like magic to the naked eye or to that camera and that sensor isn't, once you understand all of the effects of what was going on in the surrounding environment.
What exactly are you incorporating into your report? What data are we using? What are some examples of data being used? Do we have multi-sensor data, or of objects performing maneuvers that seem truly anomalous? Do we have photos, videos? What about having the NASA historian go through the NASA's historical records? Did you interview military or pilots for this study? So looking for some information about the kinds of data.
Well, I think first and foremost, our goal here is really to create a roadmap. Right. So really, we have been informed by some of the events that are reported, and we've had, but we've certainly not done a complete historical study in an archive. And I think one of the things we've wanted to do was learn what kinds of events have been reported, learn about some of the ones that have been resolved, some of the ones that are unresolved, so we can best think about how in the future we can collect data so that we can get more robust answers. So that, I hope that addressed that question.
It does.
Others have anything else they'd like to add?
All right. Then I will keep going.
More NASA, blah, blah, blah. So here's the thing. Questions were asked. And, when I was watching it originally, I thought that there were some decent questions, especially the ones that came from the public in a forum like this. In a forum like this, where you want them to ask some of the better questions, or some of the questions that might be on your mind. I think those were posed. Some of those were posed, but they just kind of skipped around it. And we know our good friend Tim Senior had posed a question. He was part of that group. Now they actually ended up grouping in the questions together and stacked them up and then presented them.
As they
Come
said.
on, man. But in fairness, I did want to go ahead and get into that. I think this will be our last clip, and then we'll just talk it out with the audience afterwards.
Let me just make one comment there before you move on, Rob. Once again, and I think it was Jen Bush who did the 8 questions that were like internal to the panel, and then there was Karen Fox who did the 8 questions that were from the public that they had bucketed.
Okay. Yeah.
And you had shown clips of both there. Once again, and I was like, fidgeting in my chair here when they start, especially when David Spiegel goes into this. all we're here to do is provide a roadmap. That's the
Yeah.
purpose of the committee. Oh, I was ready to take the hostage then. And they talk about the data. Again, the word data. And the lawyer, Mike Gold, the recovering attorney, which I thought was actually good comedy because I like attorney jokes. He brought it up. They don't even know what they're looking for. Dudes, you've had 7 months. Yes, and only $100,000. But you've had 7 months and you got your reports due in 2 months and you still don't know what you're looking for? Come on, Rob. I know there's positives in this that we should take away, but this is really
Yeah,
disgusting.
yeah,
I
no,
mean,
no doubt.
they haven't done anything, and they don't even know what they're looking for and admit it. Come on.
And
So
no doubt,
I
no
was just
doubt.
I thought that all of that went down there throughout that question and answer session before the public ones. I was just like, forget this. This committee might as well be dissolved now. But anyhow,
Yeah,
keep going.
it was a bunch of crap, man. I mean, we know that. It shows. I mean, what we're sitting here watching, like you said, you want to do something to yourself instead of rewatching the rewatch, and that's kind of, I feel the same way. But I just think it's I think the only reason why, and we're obviously a day after the hearing, most people covered it yesterday, but the only reason why is I want to let them all get that out the system. I knew it was going to be an onslaught of nothing burger, but I just wanted to see who took the time to look at the positive points in what went on here. Now, truthfully, and I'll just tell you, I mean, obviously they went into questions about ETs walking the earth. I mean, these questions just being posed on the stage in that fashion. Granted, they were being posed to NASA and not the government, but once again, with this being a 4-hour hearing that in I guess you could, I'll say it was taken seriously, and being that it presented itself to a part of the public that may not be privy to what's going on with this topic, that those type of questions being asked, and no one chuckled during that part of the questioning. So I think that's just another win, but. Yeah, we could pick this thing apart and we could really say what they didn't do and do a lot of that because they didn't do much. But I think we'll just get into this last piece and then we can talk it out and get on with the show. So one moment.
What are you doing to solve the stigmatization surrounding the study of UAP?
I think the fact that NASA has called us together here as a panel to look into this, that NASA is hosting a public meeting, that we've heard, right, it clearly stated, we're here to be transparent. I think that's the first step in trying to really normalize the study of UAPs. And we talked a little bit earlier about the reporting, about how to make it credible. And we talked also about UAP in one of the earlier talks this morning of the definition of the A, whether it was aerial or anomalous, as the legislation now is. And really the distinction beyond UFOs, right? When we're looking at UAPs here, we're beyond just airplanes. We're looking at all types of anomalous phenomena. And so that's just a more inclusive term there.
Yeah, still Mike Gold. Just wanted to emphasize what Carlin said, which is so accurate. I really consider it quite amazing that we're here having this discussion. NASA leadership deserves great kudos for this. And beyond, I think a recommendation that I'd like to make is that NASA participate in symposia, in panels, sponsor research. When you have the NASA logo on that sponsored research, on the discussion, it really helps normalize and push back against the stigma. I think NASA can leverage its excellent reputation, both domestically and abroad, to help push back on that stigma. I think it's important to do so not just for science and discovery, but for national security. That we've all seen what's occurred with balloons from rival nations. We don't want this stigma to be a vulnerability that rival nations can take advantage of.
Yes, Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Just a few additional points from the agency perspective. we are, of course, taking a set of actions to effectively normalize the study of UAPs, and that involves collaborating across the government, encouraging an open dialogue, and promoting rigorous scientific inquiry. Let me turn to each of those in turn. So in terms of promoting a rigorous scientific inquiry, the primary way we're doing this is by being truly rigorous and employing an evidence-based methodology in everything that we do. That is characteristic of scientific research. It's no accident that the people up on this stage are true experts in their respective fields, okay? So that is in turn going to help us to legitimize UAP studies. Encouraging open dialogue. So by holding public meetings such as this one and having open conversations about findings, then we're helping to normalize discussions again. And that really goes arm in arm with our commitment to openness and transparency with the public. And then finally, in terms of collaborating across the government, we're working very closely with other government agencies, not least Sean's office, AARO, to broaden the scope and the depth of our study. And I honestly believe that this collective interagency approach will lend credibility to the study of UAPs, and it's going to demonstrate the seriousness with which we're approaching this issue.
Thank you. I will move on to our sixth bucket of questions, which we had many on this topic. Is there evidence that UAP were created from non-human intelligence?
First and foremost, we are scientists, and we follow the scientific process. And I hope that the gathering here today showed a little bit of a glimpse on how the scientific process works. It's not a question that you can answer very quickly with yes or no, and we follow the data, right? So as scientists, we follow the data, we formulate hypotheses, we test theories, we follow the scientific process. The role of this panel has been to create a roadmap and a framework for how all scientists that are interested in this phenomenon can further study, can further collect data, can further formulate experiments, again, hypotheses, can test different methods, maybe even innovate on the methodology side of things, come up with new methods for how we can do basically science, but not just any kind of science, but a science of discovery and exploration, which is basically in the spirit of NASA. So just like Carl Sagan was saying, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. We cannot make that kind of extraordinary claims at all for any kind of big subjects in science, whether it's UAPs, whether it's biosignatures, whether it's technosignatures. This question of whether we are alone in the universe is probably one of the largest questions that we've had in our history of science, in our history of humanity, and it's not one that we can take lightly, and that's why we need so many scientists and multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary teams to work together, and many organizations. So it's a process, it's a roadmap, and we work collectively on this, and we hope that within our lifetime we will be able to answer this big question of whether we are alone or not, and also to better characterize this phenomenon, which is UAPs. So.
I want to sort of supplement that excellent answer by noting that we have not seen the extraordinary evidence, right? I mean, in a sense, to give, to make the claim that we see something that is evidence of, non-human intelligence would require extraordinary evidence, and we have not seen that. I think that's important to make clear.
Has NASA encountered any aliens or extraterrestrial life? What happens if the public comes across extraterrestrial life? What would NASA do if extraterrestrial life was discovered? What would NASA study or do if extraterrestrial life was discovered? Now, I think it's worth making a distinction that when we talk about extraterrestrial life, we do have a study within NASA of astrobiology, which is not intelligent life necessarily. And so I invite you, as you answer this question, to make clear the distinctions as you are talking in terms of UAPs as well as any astrobiology work that we do.
I would start by saying one of NASA's big questions is there life out there, right? And a lot of what NASA's doing in its exploration of the solar system and beyond is focused on searching for life in any form, extraterrestrial life. I think one of the things we have learned in the past 20 years is planets are common. We knew, of course, about the planets in our solar system, but we now know there are lots of planets out there. So there are lots of potential environments for life. And I think one of the most fascinating questions is, do any of those planets host life? And that's something that NASA is trying to address in a host of different ways, whether it's probes that are landing on planets or designing missions that will look for signatures of life around other planets. So the search for life is a really important theme. We haven't found life beyond Earth yet, right? I mean, let's be clear about this. We haven't found it yet. But we're looking, and we're looking for it in lots of different ways. And, you know, David was discussing technosignatures as one way that we can look both within our solar system and beyond. And there's a lot of different elements, I think, of this potential search. And, you know, just to go back to something that was phrased in an earlier question, you know, is NASA hiding anything about this? No. This is actually what, you know, answering this question is one of the things that NASA as an agency is excited about. It's something that lots of scientists working with NASA are excited about is this question of is there life out there? You know, and I think one of the things that makes this question of are we alone such a central question, not just to the scientific community, it's a central question, I think, for the public. I suspect there are more people watching this than the typical episode of NASA TV, right? And this is something where we will have, media coming to the press conference because these questions touch on something that I think is really a deep question for humanity is, are we alone in the universe?
So as you heard from my displeasure with a lot of those answers, I mean, like I said, great questions. Those are the questions that I would ask if I were there. I mean, I would want to know, do you have any signs of extraterrestrial life? What would you do for the public if the public came across an extraterrestrial? I mean, those are really good questions, actually. What did you, well, I pretty much know what you, but what did you think about the last part of that, Mattel?
I think a lot, man. There was a lot that went on there. First of all, I think the question that got posed, where the crowd, the public question that got posed, is there any evidence of non-human intelligence? I thought it was remarkable how Anna Maria Barea, there, she was in the back right corner, jumped up immediately to answer that question, like she was the assigned one in the panel to field that one. And David Spergel did comment later on it, and as we listened to, but she came out right away like she had the rehearsed answer, which she delivered. And, you know, what do we expect, right? There's no evidence, and it got stated more than once throughout the thing, throughout the whole meeting, that they have no evidence to prove that there's any sort of AT or non-human intelligence going on out there. So that didn't surprise me, but they were clearly prepared for that, and I thought it was interesting. And a couple other points, and then I'll shut up. I think one of the things that happened early in that clip was Karen Toner, I believe is her name, where they were talking about the definition of UAP. They vacillated in this meeting more than once about what the A entails. And we all know it means anomalous now. But believe it or not, one of the members, Nadia Drake, kind of initially ruled out anything in the space. She basically said, "Oh, we're only looking at aerial. Nothing in space." Like, for crying out loud, you guys are NASA. And then later on, David Burgle said anything beyond Earth orbit is NASA anyway, right? Once you get past all the satellites, it's all
Exactly.
NASA. Thank goodness the guy, David Grinspoon, who was the planetary scientist who I did finally come back and say, we are looking at stuff beyond Earth. And I was like, thank God somebody reeled this one in. But you notice they aren't even agreeing with each other. And then he also
Yeah.
brought up the whole thing about technosignatures versus biosignatures, which gets into the data again. But the point I want to make there is, biosignatures are what NASA's been looking for, right? The rovers are looking for
Right.
that on Mars, and any of the Cassini probes that fly by Saturn and Jupiter are looking for that in moons of Jupiter and Saturn. And the JWST is looking for that in the atmospheres of exoplanets. That's great. But the technosignatures got ridiculed and got defunded, i.e., SETI was originally a NASA program until the early 90s when they got defunded because people thought, oh, you're looking for radio signals from alien planets
Right.
trying to talk to us? That's too fringe. You guys are fired. And SETI had to become independent. In fact, SETI almost went out of business until they got private funding. But notice today or yesterday, now technosignatures are being considered again by the NASA team. So not only biosignatures for all the science they normally do, but now if technosignatures come into the mix, they're going to look at it. So that's a good thing, right? That was a good takeaway I had from this. But it just, I don't know. I guess I saw a lot of, there was some vacillating going on there and also a lot of uncertainty as to how they're going to proceed. And man, a lot of
Yeah.
unanswered questions, man.
Yeah, and as Tim pointed out, they sidestepped the real question and gave answers that were really vague and
Oh, yeah.
didn't really answer any of those questions.
No.
Now, it all comes down to money at the end of the day, which is, I think, why we witnessed a lot of what went on. It has to do with money, and if they just gave up the goose, just like the government, same thing applies to them. If they just give up the goose, then funding goes away. A lot of why look for life way out there when you found it right here. So and that's kind of the thing. So they tried to play nice, um, by not being dismissive of the questions, but at the same time, I think it's obviously going to come down to money in the end. Now, with that being said, NASA, and we'll just sum it up with this: NASA, never a straight answer. How did
Thank you.
you expect anything different? Now, one thing I will say though, just to kind of piggyback off of our own data collection and the Tom Kings and Tim Seymour's out there, who are gathering data on behalf of the people. Um, you know, I would say to a lot of people who tune into these things expecting to get the golden goose to quit worrying about their data and the data that they collect. Quit worrying about their data. It's theirs. Where the question I would have is, where's your data? Where's our data? So that's the most important question and where we need to focus. And I think the whole moral of this story. Now, I would also do a call to action to all the, this is something I've actually been thinking about for a while. All collectively, all the UFO podcast hosts, talk show hosts. Um, if you think about it, you put all their bases together. We probably, let's say maybe 10 shows out there, 20, 30,000 subscribers, 100,000. Now, if those hosts decided to come together, that's a few 100,000, 500,000 people probably collectively. So why aren't all hosts, if you're truly for disclosure, you're truly for humanity and progressing, uh, the word and the movement and getting us to where we need to go, then why not use come together and use that influence to get everyone on the same page essentially? Because I see that for for a group of people who want disclosure, it seems that everyone's in their segregated pockets within ufology. So, I propose, and obviously we don't have like thousands of subscribers here at Social Dig yet, but I think pretty much all hosts should have consider this having like a meeting of the mind sort of thing, where all the hosts get together and maybe appear on this show this month, and then maybe we all go to the other guy's show next month, and it's kind of like a heat check, keeping our bases, allowing our bases to communicate with each other, because we need everyone. We need everyone that is behind disclosure or wants to push for disclosure and wants to progress humanity. I think we need to get everyone together, and I think that it should be the duty of the influencers out there to facilitate that and make that happen. Or what do you think about that?
Rob, you always bring us back to reality with the overwhelmingly important issue, and that's the plight of humanity and the benefit to humanity that all of this that we're doing means. And so I'll say thank you. And yeah, I ranted and I raved a little bit about what went on here, and we were having fun. But you're absolutely right, and I couldn't agree more. And if people did align, if all of the groups did align, I mean, it doesn't mean that we all have to watch each other's show now or anything like that. You're not saying it for those reasons. You're just saying, look, we all have a common goal here, and we all feel the same way about how these government groups, whom we pay for, are proceeding. We'd like for them to hear from us. And your point is valid. If you get a loud enough voice together, they'll hear you. And what better way to do that with a platform of people who are all actually pretty well informed, right? The 10 shows that you know mentioned or estimated, all of those people, everyone there, we all know the history. We all know the past and the present, and we all know ufology didn't start in 2017. We all know that there's a rich history of a lot of unexplained things that can't be and shouldn't be ignored. And we all know what we're doing now, and we all know what we're doing as private citizens to try to answer the question on our own. I love it. I think if we bring that together and express the seriousness, then people, they would have to at least broach that topic, right?
Right.
It's like, well, why didn't you bring up the astronauts? Why and what their testimony, right? Remember, anything anecdotal, they've thrown out. And so same with Sean Kirkpatrick and AARO. The anecdotal evidence is just they don't even consider it. So, but come on, you've got reputable sources here. So no, they need to address these questions as to why they didn't bring that up. You know, why do they keep discounting anything as possibly being non-human intelligence? So, I agree with you. That's a great
Yeah. And I just think that's where it's going. So hopefully we can do that. I've seen it done in ufology before the dissension was sowed about a year or so ago. So what we're gonna do here, a little different music today, but we're gonna actually go into our next topic, or actually next segment, which is gonna be none other than Once Upon a Time in Ufology. And for this today, we're going to talk about the Roswell UFO crash. Let's just take it back to the basics. Let's take it back in time. So with Roswell, obviously most of us know about Roswell. This is for those who may not know. Those are newcomers coming into the scene. Roswell, what initially began as an extraordinary event in July 1947 with the reported crash of an unidentified flying object in the New Mexico desert, soon became shrouded in secrecy and confusion. The Roswell incident first gained public attention when an official press release by the Roswell Army Airfield, or RAAF, on July 8, 1947, declared the recovery of a flying disc from a ranch near Roswell. This announcement sparked widespread interest and speculation as people across the nation pondered the possibility of extraterrestrial life. However, within hours, the military altered its statement, claiming that the debris recovered was, in fact, from a weather balloon. Let me go ahead and move the narrative over here. So this is the cover-up. Let me go ahead full screen now. The swift change in the military's account of events surrounding the Roswell crash raises questions about the authenticity of their initial explanation. Now, numerous eyewitness accounts from local residents and military personnel contradicted the revised version. Over the years, it has become apparent that the military actively worked to downplay the significance of the Roswell crash. Now, Roswell Army Airfield, or RAAF, which was the name the base carried during World War II, actually changed its name to Walker Air Force Base, and that ran until 1967. Now it's a civilian airport. It was the initial source of the press release. The RAAF played a crucial role in disseminating the information about the crash. However, it quickly became evident that higher authorities influenced their decision to retract the statement. Major Jesse Marcel, who is pictured right here on the right, Marcel was an intelligence officer stationed at the RAAF and played a pivotal role in the recovery of the debris. Despite being initially impressed by the crash remnants, he later became a part of the military's cover-up efforts and claimed the wreckage was from a weather balloon. Next, General Roger Ramey, who's depicted on the left. General Ramey, the commander of the 8th Air Force, was instrumental in orchestrating the revised explanation for the Roswell incident. He staged a photo opportunity with the weather balloon and released a statement emphasizing the balloon's presence while downplaying any notion of a crashed UFO. Now, the motivation behind this narrative shift. The numerous theories speculate on the reasons behind the military's decision to alter the Roswell incident's narrative. Some suggest that the authorities sought to prevent mass panic and maintain national security during a time of heightened Cold War tensions. Others argue that the recovered debris may have had a connection to top secret military experiments or advanced technologies, prompting the military to conceal its true nature. Yeah, Roswell, Mattel, what do you think?
Balloons.
Balloons.
Kind of ironic again, huh?
That's where it started, right? That's where
started with balloons and
the misdirection, huh?
We got some misdirection going on then, maybe now too. But the late great Stanton Friedman, when he resurrected this case in the '80s and interviewed Jesse Marcel, that guy, I know it's anecdotal once again, but hard to deny what he had to say. And given all of the history and given all of the people who have been brought forward, hundreds of people have been brought forward, right? Books, libraries filled with books about this case. It'll never die, man. There's something happened, and I think it's all part of the cover-up that's been going on since the very beginning. We all know that, and
it's the original cover-up.
The original cover-up, and yeah, a lot had got modeled. Everything's been modeled after that there since, and history has a tendency to repeat itself.
And in this case, it did. So, moving into our last segment for today, which we always end with, is going to be science fiction, science fact, movie edition. Movie is The Martian. So, let me give you a synopsis on our pick for today. Science fiction, science fact. In the epic sci-fi film The Martian, astronaut Mark Watney finds himself stranded on the planet Mars after a fierce storm forces his crew to evacuate their mission. Presumed dead and with limited supplies, Watney must rely on his ingenuity, resilience, and scientific expertise to survive on the hostile and desolate planet. As NASA and his crew back on Earth discover that he is alive, they work tirelessly to devise a daring and unprecedented rescue mission to bring him home. The movie follows Watney's extraordinary journey as he faces numerous challenges, both physical and emotional, in his quest for survival and reunion with his fellow astronauts. The Martian is a gripping and inspiring tale of human determination, scientific exploration, and the unyielded spirit of one man against all odds. The Martian. Have you watched it? What do you
Yes,
think?
I have. And another good pick on your part. As the quest to reach Mars gets closer and closer to the reality, thanks to NASA and SpaceX, we're going to come to grips with what Matt Damon dealt with there, and that was a great movie. All I think about whenever I see this movie is potatoes.
Potatoes.
Immediately come to mind, and not to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but yeah, good rewatch. I'm going to do
He
it.
said he's the best botanist on Mars.
Great line. Yep. No one's going to argue with him there.
So, with science fact, science fiction to science fact, like always, is just looking at these movies, even if you've seen it before, which I've had many times. It's just watching it again through a new lens, understanding that we have now the capability or the ability to reach there, and we're slated to be there sometime soon here within our lifetime, within the decade, actually. So, or within the next 10 years, I believe. Yeah, so with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get out of science fiction to science facts. And then we are going to bring it home, guys. So, NASA, the hearing, the disappointment for many, the silver lining in the cloud, the understanding that it would never come from them, and then standing up as humanity and making a plan to do it without NASA or the government or these UAPX groups and groups of that nature that want to keep data from us. We have the data, tidbits drop here and there. Talk to experiencers, talk to other people who, have some of the data that you need. I have video. You want to see my video? I put it up. It's open source. It's free for you to view anytime. You may line that up with something that you saw. That person may line it up with something that they saw. And then overwhelmingly, as humanity, we painted the picture and pushed ourselves that much closer to getting the answers ourselves. What do you think about that, Mattel?
Truer words have never been spoken, my friend. You're absolutely right. We're not going to get the answers from this NASA committee, nor are we going to get them from AARO. We're not going to get disclosure from them. And as using Dave Scott's word, we're not going to even get confirmation. And there are a lot of people out there who are desperately in need of that because the phenomenon has affected their life and not always a good way. So, yes, we need to stand up as a group. We're smart enough to do this on our own. We have the crowd, we can crowdsource all of the technology and the know-how and the fortitude and the funding ourselves if needed, right? And go for it, because we're the only ones who are going to be able to get this answer. So I'm with you there.
So with that being said, just keep in mind that we still do have some things to look forward to here in the near future. Like we stated, a lot of people have things to say about Stephen Greer, but it's another forum for us to get together and talk about the issue, and especially it being held in Washington. So as far as congressional hearings go, at least we'll have something that they can look at or model themselves after. So let me go ahead and put that up on the screen. That's happening Monday, June 12th in Washington, D.C., Stephen Greer's Disclosure 2.0. This supposedly is going to be live streamed, and we will be doing a show in relation to this prior to the event, and then potentially live streaming the event, or at least summing it up afterwards. So we do this for the progression of humanity. We always do this for progression of humanity, and no one man can do it by himself. I am not here to have people look up to me. I'm here as a human just like you. And I just want to find the answers the same way that you guys do. So, Mateo, do you have anything you want to say to our viewers? Well, actually, let's run through the chat real quick. Yes. Magneticus, thanks for coming through. You are the man always. Tom King, Tom FK. Guess what the F stands for? Tim Senor.
Tim Senor.
Bonnie Evat Newton. If I messed that up, let me know. I would definitely want to pronounce that right. Well, Bonnie
from the Netherlands, she said.
From the Netherlands. Let me see. Oh, from the Netherlands. Wow, okay. We got Dave Scott, Spaced Out Radio.
Scott came in. He's gone because he started his show. Yep.
Dogface
is in there, and who else did we have? I think that just about
I don't want to miss
everybody.
anyone, because we value every single subscriber. We may not have the most, but we love our subscribers because we know we're all like-minded. We all know that we're here for the same things, and we want the same results. Let me see.
And Maggie.
That might be it. Maggie.
We have Maggie M10.
Maggie M10. Oh, thanks for coming through, Maggie M10. She is one of our new subscribers, so I definitely want to thank her for coming out, Maggie. And I'll probably see you over there on Spaced Out Radio. So with that being said, you know how me and Mateo do it. He's the engineer. I am the host, Mr. Rob G. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. You guys have a great rest of your day. Keep looking up. Take care.